What is your updated assessment of Tre Mann in the Hornets context now that the sample size is starting to grow? What kind of bench role could you see him play on next year's squad? And where does he rank up in relation to some of the other young bench guards? Brian, I'll let you start this one off. First off, Tre Mann is averaging 12 points, 5 assists, 5 rebounds in those 15 or so games here in Charlotte. And good timing with this question because he actually had a pretty good game against the Sixers on Saturday where his drive and kick game was working. A couple of driving pass to the rim. He got into the passing lanes again defensively. But Brian, what is your overall assessment on Tre Mann and where does he kind of stack up against the other guys?
Yeah, I've enjoyed watching him. I've enjoyed all of the pieces that Charlotte picked up at the, right before the deadline. I think a lot of those guys have played positive basketball. I think, they're heading to an interesting offseason with Mann. He'll be heading into the final year of his rookie deal next season. I think he's played very well. I think there's very obvious talent with him on the basketball. Some of the shot creation and playmaking with those empty side pick and rolls that he's run, gets with Grant or with Nick Richards. His movement off the ball, the spot up shooting in the corner. Richie, you've highlighted this a few times, but his just aggression and timing and feel and passing lanes as a defender. Been very pleased and I would say rather encouraged by how he's played this season for Charlotte. And he's a guy that I want around for them, for at least a little bit longer. I want more of a runway to work with here. Obviously they're set up roster wise to have kind of an interesting, the backcourt is a little interesting for next season, in part because, hopefully, you're going to pencil in LaMelo as healthy. And if so, then obviously he's starting at point guard and playing a ton and, offense is largely flowing through him. But what happens with the other guard spot? Does Miller end up there or is he elsewhere along the wing more at the three? What developments does Nick Smith Jr. get into this offseason? And I don't think we've talked about the Mann LaMelo backcourt. I mean, I think it's something I'd like to see some of, but I don't imagine it as a long-term starting backcourt. I don't think it's that for a few different reasons, both fit, defense, that type of stuff. But I think Mann is a guy that I don't think I would define him as a microwave scorer, sort of the classic 6-man, come in, the Lou Williams, Jamal Crawford type. But to me, he can sort of be just microwave offense because you can give him a second unit and just kind of let him do his thing with the ball. Let him run a bunch of pick and rolls. And then in some games, he's going to be able to close out for you. He'll be a spot starter. But to me, I think there's absolutely a role for him next season, and maybe Nick Smith in the offseason comes back and he's really ready for a larger role next season, in which case those guys are going to have to kind of compete. I think they could play together some with the second unit, but in terms of being sort of the third guard, it would be interesting to see that competition. But I would long-term prioritize Nick Smith Jr. because he's younger, more years on his rookie contract. But I like Mann, and I think he's a guy that Charlotte should consider having around for the next few seasons maybe.
Yeah, his position is one thing that kind of I wouldn't say drives me crazy, but I think his versatility helps and hurts in a lot of different ways because the role moving forward, it kind of depends on his pecking order, but he's got the versatility to play on the ball as a point guard, but also off ball as a secondary playmaker. And this season, just in general, it seems like Clifford views him more as a off ball shooting guard type. And he hasn't really played much as that primary guy. If you look at Basketball Reference, it tells you that he has spent 100% of his minutes at point guard, but that's just not the case. But as an off-ball guy, kind of to Brian's point, he's not necessarily a microwave scorer. I don't really view him as a guy that's a catch and shoot guy. It's more of the ball gets swung around, he's relocating, which I actually think he does a good job of.
Yep.
And when he does get the ball on the weak side, he's still kind of prone and inclined to want to break down the defense with his ball handling moves. So regardless of what position you call this guy, he is his game is very similar depending on whether he's playing the point guard or the shooting guard. It really doesn't change a ton. And then defensively, you mentioned this about the pairing with LaMelo. I think he has like the intangibles. I think the compete level is fine. I've mentioned this before. I know that sounds like a broken record, but he's got good hands in the passing lanes. He's going to be around the loose balls. He's a good rebounder for his size. But I think physically he's just going to be outmatched one-on-one. There're just going to be some matchups where he just doesn't really stand a chance, kind of, disrupting the penetration. So that's why I think ultimately I don't know where he and LaMelo could play side by side, at least not for sustained minutes as a backcourt duo. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he falls within the pecking order of all the other guards. Like if you're taking Brandon Miller out of the equation, because I kind of view him more as a wing/forward, LaMelo's obviously the top guy when healthy. But do we view Cody Martin and Vasa Micic above Mann? Or just Martin? Like, where does he fall there, do you think?
I would just say I think I would have Martin above Micic
Right.
in the pecking order. I think Micic has played quite well with Charlotte. I've really enjoyed his drives. He's crafty. He's strong. He's physical. You can see why he was such an accomplished player in Europe before he got over here. And I will say, watching he and Mann, Richie, I don't know how much of the Thunder you've seen this year, but like they drive the ball, right? Like they are relentless in how they pressure the rim and how they
Right.
want to heat things up with their drives. It starts with Shea, but it's J Dub, it's a lot of other guys there too. And you can see how those guys like have that DNA in their game to drive the ball. And you can also see why the Thunder were interested in Micic. Like it totally makes sense. But I would prioritize. I just think that I think Cody's got more versatility. He's a better defender. And he can, it's not like he's a total like he can do stuff with the ball too. I mean, he can be a secondary guy. He can run, empty side pick and roll. And he can catch and go. So I would say him. I would prior as far as that, I would prioritize him. But there is a bit of a I wouldn't say log jam, but it does make it seem like at some point, Charlotte's going to be able to when they want to flip the switch, they're going to be able to execute some trades with some of the guys that they have in the guard room right now because they're all on pretty favorable contracts.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, here we go. Yeah, regarding Mann, I think that he's very malleable, which is probably, his greatest asset on this roster. I think he can play with really any other guard on the team, which is good. I mean, I largely agree with you guys. He's not like a microwave scorer type necessarily, but he has some of those tools in the toolbox, like his step back, just his ability to get his own shot kind of whenever he wants is certainly a good thing to have as a guy that you need to come off the bench and score the basketball. I think he's fine as a facilitator. I don't love the idea of him being like the lead facilitator off the bench. I really like the fit of him and Cody Martin playing together. Number one, I think Cody Martin is more naturally suited to kind of be set up the offense. Facilitator is a little bit bigger, more of a passing, I would say natural passing feel. And then defensively, I think it's a good fit too, because I'm skeptical that Tre Mann's going to be able to guard much more than ones primarily moving forward in the NBA. So Cody Martin, can slide up or even slide down a position. So I like that fit. But look, Tre Mann is he's going to be he's going to be a guy in the NBA, I think, that eventually settles into a bench kind of role. And I think Charlotte's a really good place for him to establish that and get a second contract. And I think the Hornets, the likelihood of them getting a pretty fair deal is I think there's a high probability for that. So I do like the fit long term with Mann and Charlotte. Richie, I think when my computer was freaking out there, you were asking, do we prioritize like a Cody Martin and maybe a Micic over a guy like Mann? I would just say that they're all very different players, which I think is a good thing, and that they all have very different strengths and can play together. It probably raises more the question: is Steve Clifford the right one to figure this frankly deep guard rotation going into next season, assuming health? Is he the right guy to figure all that out and put the right places together? I don't know the answer to that, but I think Mann's going to be fine because he's a malleable player, and I think he's definitely a value add to this roster.
Yeah, I think my assessment so far of him is like he's done pretty well here in Charlotte, and for the most part, he's been pretty steady. He doesn't have many games where he goes crazy, but he doesn't have many games where he's completely non-existent. And I think for his size and stature, he does a good job of like staying physical on both ends of the court. Offensively, he's not afraid of contact driving to the rim. And I think, where I would rank him among the guards for next year, like I said, kind of taking out Brandon Miller, him and Micic, are probably like 3-4, but like LaMelo and Martin, to your guys' point, probably 1-2. And then Nick Smith Jr., I know you guys are higher on him probably than I am. I think I might actually put him below Mann, but I guess to Brian's point, Nick Smith Jr. is just younger and you have a little bit more runway with him and to develop him. So I think right now, though, I would put Mann above Nick Smith Jr. And then Bryce McGowan's, to me, he's probably more of a wing/forward too as well, but like he's kind of like on the bottom of this list that was suggested from our Substack from Michael. So I don't know where you guys view McGowan's in relation to Tre Mann, but not that I'm losing hope on him, but he just seems so far down the pecking order.
We talked about McGowan's a couple of weeks ago, I think, Richie, if I'm remembering correctly. And I do like Bryce. I think he's been sort of like more pushed into like a catch and shoot, catch and go, spot up role. And that I think he's like done okay with that. Part of the pitch with him out of Nebraska, though, was 6'7" guy that could also run pick and roll. Haven't seen a ton of that this season. And it's just tough because from like playmaking upside perspective, he hasn't shown as much as even a guy like Nick Smith Jr., who has had his ups and downs and limited minutes as rookie, but I think has also played quite well, in flashes and really shown some good stuff for Charlotte. Spencer touched on this, and it's worth mentioning because all of the guys are different, but they can all all of them can kind of handle a little bit and play off the ball. Having a guy like Mann that has that, like his defining thing is obviously like the space creation and his ability to get so low, like keep an eye, like watch his legs and his shins, just like how he's got like Kemba, like sort of like quick flexibility in terms of like how he's able to, pull back on crossovers and that type of stuff. You kind of want to keep guys like that around who can do that. Because like that's even in the NBA where you've got a ton of guys that can get their own shot. It's still pretty special, and it's probably something you want to try to bet on and see if you can, because like if you can get the other stuff to work, then you've got another you have an outlier type characteristic in terms of like shot creation. Maybe not outlier, but you've got like a really impressive skill in terms of the ability to like create space one-on-one. In Mann's numbers, like in Charlotte, it's not a large sample. He hasn't been here all that long. He missed some time with an injury, but 1.28 points per possession on spot ups. He shot the three really well off the catch in Charlotte. And when he runs pick and roll, the Hornets have scored, this is including passes, but 0.96 points per possession, which is not too bad. And he shot the ball, decently out of the pick and roll, at least like from twos. And he shot the ball 64% at the rim. So I think overall, like he's shown you some pretty nice flashes in a relatively limited sample. And I do kind of like the Martin and Mann, backcourt pairing as well. I think that would be kind of not a bad place to start from if that's your sort of like, backup, guards next season. There's some interest there. And like as crowded as the guard room is for the Hornets right now, like, this is a team that's going to probably end up with a top 5 pick, and they could look guard again. Like they're like, I like there are some guys that are interesting for them that are going to be in that draft range, and they might add another guy like that to to the mix. If it's Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepherd, Jacoby Walter, like those guys. I mean, Stephen Castle, Stephen Castle, I should say, from UConn, who I really like and actually think would be kind of a cool fit, even if top 5 is maybe like a little rich for him. But just like there's some interesting guys they could add, which would crowd things even more. And certainly that would make things tough for guys like McGowan's that are already sort of like pushed to the fringes here.